All right, finally. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eugene has asked me to introduce myself before talking to you, but I prefer to leave that to you as homework. I know this is fairly late in the day because we are having the last session and you must be tired, and psychologists tell us that when, after a whole day's work, we find ourselves in this situation, there is a lot of loss of attention. But I'd like to assure you that we still have something very important to tell you, especially given the topic that we have, which is very topical and very useful, as you have been informed. Now, we are talking about communication, and I asked myself, what should I talk about? We have eminent journalists and communicators that will be talking to you shortly, and I thought I should do justice to the presentation of communication within the context of climate and finance adaptation, which is actually development communication. And then, so that will prepare the stage for the rest of the discussion, and those who will be presenting specifics will be able to see the context in which we are talking about. Now, communication in advancing the agenda of climate adaptation, finance, is actually communication that seeks to enhance development in general. Because when you talk about climate adaptation, you are talking about mitigation of the impact of climate change, reducing the effect of climate change. And that has direct relationship with development, because people want to have good conditions of living, and climate adaptation has to do with improving the welfare and the living conditions of people. And therefore, we will be talking about communication for development, because what you will have to be doing when you are doing communication for climate change adaptation, you are actually doing communication for development. And what are we talking about? National development. As you know, development is something that is sought after by everyone, every nation. Not even the so-called developed nations of the world have stopped seeking development, because development has to do with human resources, natural resources, acting on each other to ensure that we improve the living conditions of citizens. Many of your peers are running to the North America and Europe in search of better living conditions. And we here are struggling to ensure that development brings to us the better living conditions for our people and our citizens. So living conditions that are measured and are measurable in terms of the standard of living, in terms of health, in terms of the housing facilities that we live in terms of education, in terms of food security. We've just had a very good meal. Some people don't have what to eat. That determines the kind of living conditions. So development is determined by all of these resources, and national development is the attempt of all of us and all people working together to ensure that we improve the living conditions of our citizens and we reduce the poverty that we find in the villages as you go away from the skyscrapers of the cities. That is a characteristic of our development, where you have that dichotomy of skyscrapers in the cities, and you have abject poverty as you go away from the cities. So we need to reduce that. And communication has an important role to play. We'll talk about that. Now, in the 21st century, the century in which we live, we are told that it is the century of knowledge economy. Knowledge. Knowledge rules the world. You know or you don't know. If you are ignorant, I'm afraid you don't have much to live on. Those who are poor are those who are ignorant. Those who belong to the industrialized world are those who are knowledgeable. Because knowledge production, knowledge dissemination, knowledge appropriation determines the quality of life of the people. So there are 4 pillars of the knowledge economy, according to me. I have published that and have defended that. The key pillars of knowledge economy is that this knowledge production, you produce the knowledge through research, through working in the farms, through all sorts of means, knowledge in the general sense, knowledge in terms of tangible knowledge, and the knowledge that is software knowledge. So that's why IT and artificial intelligence become quite important in mediating between all sorts of knowledge. So knowledge production, those who produce knowledge in quantity and quality are those that are considered quite developed, especially if they can disseminate that knowledge and use that knowledge to bring in income to improve the living conditions of the citizens. So beyond the knowledge production pillar, you have the knowledge dissemination. What is produced has to be made available to the citizens locally so that they can use it to improve their living conditions, or it can be marketed to bring in resources and improve living conditions. The third and very important pillar is what I've called knowledge appropriation. That's getting the knowledge so that you improve your own conditions. And I think this is what Acess is doing. They are empowering you with knowledge so that you can see how you can improve your standards of living and contribute to development. So knowledge is available, it's accessible, and you can now have it, you can appropriate it, you can acquire it, but more importantly, you can appropriate. And I make a distinction between acquisition and appropriation. You acquire, but when you appropriate, it means you own it. And in that word appropriation, there's the stem, property. It becomes your property. When that knowledge becomes yours and you can use it the way you use your computers and other aspects of knowledge, that is appropriation. We think that's where we should be moving to acquire knowledge, especially with respect to the theme of this conference, climate change adaptation, finance adaptation. Now, in all of the different pillars of knowledge, language is crucial. Communication is crucial. Whether you are talking about producing knowledge, that's doing research and thinking, you can't think without language. You conceptualize, you use language. And the language that you know best is the one that helps you to maximize your ability to think. Okay? Then, communication, dissemination, you can't disseminate without language. Okay, so language is crucial. Appropriation of knowledge, that is being able to acquire and own the knowledge and use it for whatever purpose, you need language. So, and then of course there's knowledge management, which requires that within the nation, within the community, the knowledge that is available is properly managed. And therefore, when we talk about development, national development, we realize that language is crucial because it is the means by which the skills and the competencies and technologies that you have are transferred from the one who knows to you and to all of us so that we can possess that knowledge. As I mentioned just now, throughout this workshop, language has been used to communicate new ideas to you, right? Have you learned something during this seminar workshop? Oh yes, if you did, it means that there was some new idea that came across to you and you were able to receive it, take it in, and now you are empowered. You can use it also to do a number of things. So effective learning and acquisition of all knowledge and technology takes place when there is effective communication. Effective communication. So communication is crucial. Whatever results you're going to get with what lessons you've learned from here will depend on how you effectively communicate all of these ideas to the others. And one thing that is crucial in communication is comprehension, understanding. What is the finality? What is the objective of communication? If the person to whom you are talking does not understand, does not comprehend what you are saying, it doesn't make sense. Because why would you be talking to him? You want him to get some ideas that you have, and therefore comprehension is crucial. And comprehension is best achieved when the language that is used to communicate is the language that the target person, the interlocutor, knows well. Did you hear what I said? No, you heard, but you did not understand. All right? So what's the purpose of communicating if I do not use a medium of communication that you can understand and so appropriate the knowledge? So it's important that development should take place with a new idea being communicated via a language that the audience, the target audience, knows and understands. Unfortunately, this is not what happens quite often in our various countries, African countries, because we have used what we call official languages, English and French, to the detriment of the languages that are spoken by a vast majority of our population. The African languages, Cameroonian languages, Nigerian languages, Kenyan languages, languages that are spoken uniquely or essentially by a good majority. So when communication is effected and done in the official language alone, what happens? It means that the other people who are not listening and understanding English or French are marginalized. True or false? They're excluded. They're excluded from the process. So if we're going to have any development, communication, information that is intended to improve the living conditions of the people, and that communication is in a language that is official, global, but is not known and used by the people to whom you want to whose conditions you want to improve, you failed. And that's why we're failing. A lot of our development fails because the communication, the good ideas we have, the knowledge we have is not accessible. Knowledge is available, but not accessible to those who need that knowledge to improve on their conditions. And yet, if you look at our constitutions, you look at our ideals, we are saying that we want development that is participatory. Have you heard of it? Because we believe that development must be participatory. But is that what happens? Do we have people participating in the development? Okay. And it is said that development must be inclusive. You've heard that, isn't it? Leaving no one behind. Ah, yes. If you listen to or read the African Union's Agenda 2063, that's a very key concern. Our development should be one where everybody's moving up and we're not leaving people behind. But if we do not communicate using a language that the people know so that they have the knowledge that we want them to have, then we are leaving them behind. We're excluding them from the development process. And that's what is happening. So we will have to bear this in mind as we go along. Now, development communication is crucial because it has to be participatory, as we said. And what does that mean? It means that those to whom we are communicating should be in a position to respond, to interact. The development must be, the communication must be interactive. If communication is not interactive, then it is limited. So we will be having essentially what I call information communication, but not development communication. So there are two types of communication. Information communication is the one that is fairly general. People on the radio and television, they communicate, and the targeted audience listen. Whether they understand well or not does not matter. All right? The information has gone out. People may be aware because they have heard something. But if the finality, the objective of your communication is to achieve a goal of having your target react or change behavior or get empowered, then information communication is not enough. You will need what we have referred to as development communication, which is essentially participatory in the sense that it allows for interaction, it allows for questions to be asked, and so it's essentially a bi-directional exchange, dialogue, using language that the person understands in a manner that the person can understand and therefore appropriate the ideas that you've brought in, understand them, and this will lead to a change of attitude. Okay, they can change their attitude, change their behavior, and then adopt new ideas. So this is communication that is essentially transformative. You want the person to change, to become somebody. And that kind of communication is not congruent with a unidirectional talking to people like I'm talking now. There must be opportunity for exchange. Let me illustrate that so that it's very clear. A few years ago, we had cholera, an outbreak of cholera in the north of this country. And it was deadly. People were dying. And the government did everything. They sent in teams, and but the situation did not recede. People were still dying. Although there was a lot of effort to communicate, to tell them, look, use salt, and so on and so on. And all kinds of things they had to do. But the situation did not subside. So we told them, we advised them, please, all the information you are giving out should be given in Tupuri, in Mundang, in Di, and all the languages in the north. And once they had all of that information, properly packaged information which was useful to stopping the cholera, when that information was released and given out in the various languages, the situation went down. And one of our former students, university professor who was on the field, had this to say. When the people were told that they should not drink water from the Mayo, that's the river, okay? The people said, why? Why not? Our ancestors have been drinking this water from the Mayo over the years, and it gives them only blessings. But when they were told in the language they understood that the water your ancestors are drinking, were drinking, is not the same water you are drinking today. Because there were no settlements upstream, with so many people doing a lot of things in the water that should not be done. And in fact, a lot of people do in the river, what should be done in a toilet. And when this was explained, some old men in the villages, ha, to, yo, meaning, ha, yes, I now understand. Okay? In other words, there was that mental declic, which clearly got them to have what we call a metanoia, a change of mind, change of attitude, which now made it possible for them to have an aversion for water that is coming from the river, and they can now go far away because they were trying to avoid going far away to fetch water. So the language that is used to communicate can get results which you would not get otherwise. That's the point that I'm making there. Okay, appropriation. This is, sorry, do we have it there? I don't seem to have that. All right. This is crucial, and I'll just go over it rapidly. You have heard about advocacy, right? We've talked about advocacy. We've talked about awareness campaigns. When information is given with the intent for people to have a new idea, appropriate that knowledge, I can tell you that for them to accept what you are saying is not an event. It doesn't take place like that. It's a process. So appropriation of new knowledge is a process. You don't tell people, oh, you see, use condoms. And then they say, yeah, I'm going to use condoms. You know what happened during when it happened and people were given advice. A new idea like that, people say, what? What is it? And the question is in relationship to their own habits and traditions. Okay, so they don't accept, people don't usually accept something just because you've told them. So information communication limits what kind of reaction you expect. And that's why we're talking about the kind of communication that is more intensified and bidirectional if you want to get results. So what happens really in appropriation, and the research that we have done shows that it's a process that begins with awareness. When the information is given in a language that person understands, people are aware that it's a new idea, okay? But awareness, that might be the end of it for some people. But beyond that, there can be comprehension. They can now understand why. And when they comprehend, there are indicators, I won't go into that. The idea is more vividly recalled, it's more analytical and so on. Beyond comprehension, then the people can now know. Okay? Awareness, comprehension, knowledge. Knowing something means that it has been consolidated in the mind and you can retrieve it. You can ask questions and people say, yes, I know it, because they can get it back to you. And it's not everything that we hear that gets to be part of knowledge, all right? There are things that don't get into the knowledge box. And beyond knowledge, we can evaluate the idea and come up with some attitudes. Well, let me continue to use that example. We can use an example. We can have a positive attitude towards the new idea or a negative attitude. And if we have a positive attitude, the chances are that that new idea will now go from being just part of your knowledge to being something that you appropriate, okay, because you have a positive attitude, which will lead to a change of behavior in favor of it, and that change of behavior will also lead to change of mindset. Change of mindset, very crucial. You've heard it said that what Africa needs, what we Africans need for our development is what? A change of mindset. Have you heard that before? Yes, people say, okay, we have a refractory mindset, we have a colonial mindset, okay, or Okay, so we need a change of mindset. But what does that mean? Clearly, it means that we need to do something about our behavior and our attitudes, because we have found that there's a correlation between attitude and behavior. If you have a positive attitude towards something, then you will like it, you will do it. You don't play football if you don't have a positive attitude towards it. Your behavior is conditioned by the attitude. Negative attitude, if somebody says, what should I use to shock you so that you remember? If somebody says, same-sex marriage, that should become law, what will be your attitude? Okay, okay. So, yes, so that will determine whether that idea will become part of your action or not. So, appropriation really depends on attitudes, and it is the attitudes that will lead to change. Now, unfortunately, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Okay. Unfortunately, when a new idea comes in and people have to acquire it or appropriate it, as I said, it's not easy because some people, especially in the villages, people can hesitate about a new idea because it is against the tradition, it's against the beliefs, it's against the culture, it's against the religion, and there are all kinds of variables that can impede the acceptance and appropriation of a new idea when it's communicated. So what do we do if we really think that that new idea is good for the population, is good for the people, and they need to acquire it? Okay, we have proposed what we have referred to as attitude engineering, given the importance of attitude. Namely that we must find ways and means of ensuring that people's attitudes, negative attitudes, can be polarized, can become positive, and positive attitudes, when necessary, can become negative, so that the change of attitude would lead to a change of behavior that would lead to the person accepting the new ideas so that development can take place, so that change can take place. For instance, we are talking about finance adaptation. If you're going to succeed in finance adaptation and you get to people who are not free with giving out money, you have to find ways and means of changing their attitudes so that they can give you the money and you'll be able to have the money to ensure adaptation. All right, so attitude engineering is something that we must get into if we want results. And therefore, for conclusion, communication for climate adaptation finance is important. It is within the context of development in general. Communication for development, which requires that we understand that we want results. We're not just going to communicate and go away. We want the people to give the money to us, and we must look for ways and means of ensuring that the communication is efficient and effective and brings in results. And in that case, you have to have bidirectional communication, dialogue. You have to think of the target audience. The target audience for you in advocacy, in this respect, you have multi-stakeholders because you have rich men, you have the government, you have the population. All of them, you have to talk to them. And the talking to them, you need to look at the message that you have to give them. And Eugene had already talked about that. The kind of message you are going to give and the way you organize your message and shape it will determine to what extent you are going to be successful. Beyond the message, the medium, the language medium, I've spent quite a lot of time on that. The language you use must be the one that people can understand and which will create an impact, lead them to a metanoia, change of attitude, change of mindset. Then the mode of delivery. How do you deliver your discourse, your talk, in such a way that it's pleasant, it's convincing, and get results? Miyaka Nagode. Asante sana. Merci pour votre aimable attention.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think this was needed to move away from what we have been discussing since we came here. But we want to dig a little deeper into that conversation. I know I'm seeing hands are already rising. I'm going to bring two more people to join Prof here, and we're going to have a very short conversation around some of the issues that Prof has raised, and then we can open the floor to the rest of the room. Let me invite Professor Antonifo Helen to join Prof up here. And let me also invite Ms. Nyanga Sandy to also come forward. Please sit towards the middle of we are only three of us, so we should sit towards the middle of the floor. So, Prof, thank you so much. I'm going to start. Prof, as you sit down, I'm going to start, Professor Tony, for now. I'm going to start with you in your to bring your perspectives to the conversation. And the question is, Prof has actually given us quite an insight into the role that communication can play in advancing the climate agenda, but also, or more specifically, in the context of this forum, Adaptation Finance for Energy Access. My question is, in what ways can cultural context, because I think it's important, and local dialects, I think Prof already made some allusion to that, or languages influence the effectiveness of climate change communication, and how can we adapt our messaging to address these nuances?
Thank you very much.
I hope I could break up that question into smaller bits, but...
Okay. I think, let me try. I've understood the question. Because, and I want to thank Prof for the overview he has given on this aspect of language and communication, because no matter how we converse, no matter how we bring ideas about climate adaptation, if we don't put it in, intelligible language that everybody can understand, of course, all that we are saying will be nonsense. So the fact that we are even understanding what is going on in this forum, all the presentations, is because the presenters have presented in languages that we can understand. You see, when Prof started, he spoke in Chomba. Okay, I come from Bafut, I could understand. But he asked whether, can you hear me? We say, yes, we can hear you. We heard him, but we could not understand him. So language is meant for communication. It's supposed to communicate meaning. Now, there are four important aspects about language and communication. One is the message. In our case, for this UFAFA forum, what is the message? What's our message? Yes, climate justice. We put it that way. I've heard people say that. They say, what do you want? When? Okay. Now, let me just say something as an illustration before I start talking about, before I go deeply into context. When you say noun, for instance, noun is a generic term, isn't it? If it is not noun, what will happen? Do we have any powers to change, to change that climate or to change the financing that is not enough now. Okay, I don't think that we have it. I really don't think that we can change it now. But we can change it, if we can change it now, we can also change it forever. Because if we change now, and then in the future, we cannot change it again, or they go back to their old habits, what happens? So, what I'm saying is that when you have a topic like climate adaptation, for instance, it's a continuous process. We talk about advancing climate adaptation. It's continuous. And so when you say noun is just stagnant. So it should be now and forever. Because this idea about financing should be forever. You see how just one word can change meaning. Yes, in community. And that is what we youths are very, very innovative in language. When I listen to them use language, you see them being innovative. Now we are all sitting here in this room as we are all Africans, right? So far we've been using only English and French. Tell me whether English and French are our languages to Africans. Okay. So what is wrong with our own languages? Why can we not use our own languages? Because we are talking about our own problems. I heard a lady yesterday. She was so passionate when she was talking about this climate. I think that's how I can say. And I said, oh my God, I wish she could also express it in the indigenous languages, so that they can understand better. I'm telling you, the schools where indigenous languages are taught first, those children grasp ideas. They grasp, the concepts faster than if they are taught in a foreign language. Do we agree? Yes. Which means that we definitely have to promote our indigenous languages if we want to be creative, if we want to be innovative in this affair of, advancing climate adaptation. We need to bring into play our indigenous language, especially as the people you are going to address. Remember that if you want to adapt, financing, it's not only money. The adaptation is not only money. It's also, attitudes. You talked about attitudes. Yes. I'll give you a simple example. In the north of Cameroon, I think just about two weeks ago, there was a flood. But, in that cultural context, how do you go and tell somebody in the north, a Fulani, to leave his cattle behind and run and save his life? It's difficult. You have to use local realities. So if you are going to maybe sensitize them on what to do when there's a flood, for instance, you have to include their cattle. If you don't include their cattle, which is their cultural, well-being, day-to-day well-being, they will not listen to you. If you tell them to leave their cattle, they will not leave it. They will stay and die with their cattle. In the same way, you see, Europeans in the international scene, when there's a flood, and you see rescue teams come to help, what do people do? They carry their dogs and their pets. Yes, those are the things they carry. They don't take property. Here, maybe we'll take clothes. You look for your expensive shoe and your dress and take along. But, so actually what I'm saying by these very simple illustrations is that the language you use, whether to advise or to educate people, should be contextually orientated. It must agree. It must fall in line with the culture of the people. You even when you are designing projects on advancing climate adaptation, do not design projects that do not fall in line with with the realities of the context where you are doing it. I think.
Thank you so
that is-
much. Thank you so much. Let me now turn to you, Sandy. You are a spoken word artist, you're a writer, and my thinking and my question is, how can we use, again, we're staying with language, but this time focusing on storytelling techniques to make climate science more accessible and relatable. We've actually spoken about those two dimensions in Prof's plural presentations. The idea that it has to be accessible, but it also has to be relatable.
Yeah.
But my question is, how do we use storytelling techniques, especially when we are talking to diverse audiences, to ensure that we are effective in our communication, especially of the scientific and sometimes very technical issues like climate change adaptation and climate finance?
Okay. Thank you very much. Hello? Okay. So when I first of all want to appreciate Prof for that very detailed presentation. It almost did everything that we were going to discuss here. And now coming to art or to storytelling, we understand that art is like the thing that emotionally connects us. There are people here that if we start talking about things that affect us from now till tomorrow, it may not really mean anything to them. But if we come here and sing a song about some people who died in a flood, or we tell a story about something that happens to some people, if we bring a movie, you are going to cry your eyes out. Do we not agree? So art is that thing that emotionally connects us to our realities. So that doesn't leave climate action out of it. It means that if we want people to be connected, if we want people to feel the need, if we want people to feel the urgency, because I believe data does the need thing. Data makes us understand the need. We know what is going on. We know everything that is happening. We know that this has to be done. But how do we feel the urgency? It is when we start using art. It is when we start using storytelling. It is when we start using other forms in order to relate our reality. It also brings to what Prof just explained here. She says, when you want to take the story to people, or when you're teaching children in villages, you use their local languages and you understand better. So if you're bringing art, you're also bringing contextually appealing art to a certain people in order to not only share the knowledge, in order to not only disseminate information, but also to bring that inclusivity and accessibility. I guess you mentioned that word. Accessibility here means when we sat here, we are discussing and all of us are understanding, because in some way we have a background. Almost everybody here applied. And in your application, you needed to show your understanding of adaptation, finance, and everything that is happening in the climate sector. Now, what if we bring somebody from my village, let me use that for example, and you're having these conversations, they're not going to understand anything you're saying. You're using bureaucratic language, you're using the policies, you're talking in terms that are out of their space. So how do we bring that into a level where they understand? You use art, you use storytelling, you use songs, you use paintings, you use literature. We use those things that people can easily relate to. That is their own form, or that is their own way of understanding the things that we are using policies, or we are using some kind of high language to discuss. And also, another way of bringing this in, or another way of using art is we understand that there are cultural nuances in our community, especially as Africans. There are things that we will consider environmental challenges, that if you take to some villages, those people would consider them as cultural problems. I don't know if we get that. There are things that if we say a flood came, for example, or we are experiencing a drought, climate activists are going to talk about the climate perspective of it. But Africans are likely going to talk about the gods not favoring us. about things that are happening, about the gods being angry, about us doing sacrifices. So you see that their understanding of it, or our understanding of it, is different. There are two unrelated things. So it takes you now using all the forms, instead of just bringing the literature, instead of just bringing the statistics. They'll say it's the white man's thing. But if you bring literature now, a contextually appealing literature, I'll keep going back to that because Madam talked about language. So as a literature, or as somebody who is doing storytelling, you are not just to sit and then say things because you believe that the things are true. Every writer is a researcher. And James Baldwin said, if you want to know the history of a people, you read their literature. In fact, if you want to know the true history of a people, you read their literature. So if you want to know even the true present of a people, you read their present literature, right? So if you want to hear how we feel, if you want to understand how people feel about climate or about these things, you would want to hear what their activists or what their artists are saying. How do artists feel about this? What are artists saying about this? How are the people understanding what the artists are saying? Because when you get that understanding of it, if we want to get into the villages, adaptation is not just about us getting the finance. When we get the finance, there is execution. And that execution, we are going to communities. And until those communities are able to receive us, we will not even achieve our goals. So for them to receive us, we need to be able to make them understand us. And understanding can be through storytelling. Understanding can be not only us doing the art, but even bringing art from that community, letting people speak contextually, because of course we'll believe people that are coming from our context more. So I believe that is the role that art plays in advancing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's, you know, when you're conceiving some of these programs, you can never fully appreciate the breadth of inputs that can be relevant to the conversation. And this is just a moment that in our own conceptualization, it's been out of our scope of design. And I want to thank Dr. Njamshi for insisting that we have a session like this. Perhaps he had, well, that's why you're Edie. You have better foresight. So thank you so much. And as you spoke, something occurred in my mind, and I'm wondering, could it also be that art can allow us to discuss some of the issues that are considered taboo, that are considered politically inappropriate, that we can use art to explore subjects and themes that the politician, for example, the professional, for example, would find difficult to areas that these people will find difficult to get into.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Art is like the escape route for activists. Yeah. Every time you want to say something and you don't want to be caught responsible for saying that, I hope there are no ears here. Yeah, but if you want to say something, there is something called, let me say it in the poetic world, poetic license, which means you have the license, as Prof is saying here, you have the license to say certain things. You have the license to talk about certain things. So art is that tool that you can use to get into taboo conversations. There was a time I was doing research in, how do they call it? Breast ironing, something that happens within, mostly in the Southwest, and this female genital mutilation. And when you're doing that, if you get to the people within that space, you're trying to ask them questions around that, they'll find you totally unappealing. But if you bring it as literature, as I want to put this in a book, I want to write about this, I want to put it this way, they listen to you. Because the thing that, art is the thing that represents them. So in contexts where we find things a little bit out of our scope of conversations, art can be an excellent tool of having our voices heard.
Thank you so much. So that we don't monopolize the conversation, I'd like to invite the audience to join us now. And I'm going to do like I did yesterday. But this time, because this hand has been persistent, I'm going to start with this table and move towards the back of the room. And when we get to the back of the room, that will be the end of it. Yes, I can see the hands at the back, so I'm starting at the front. Please, yes, I'm also trying not to lose my job, so let me go to Edie first, and then I'll come to you.
You better not try to lose your job. Especially I had a big fight with you to have this session. Thank you very much. I think I've not attended any session since the beginning of this meeting yesterday. I timed it at least to be here for this session because I take it very dear to my heart. Climate change affects us in many ways. It affects health, education, food, and most especially culture. Our ways of life, our relationship with Mother Earth are yoked together in such a way that when part of the system is affected, the whole system goes down. I was having a conversation with Ambassador Hussein this morning about what we are doing in Acess and Pakja, trying to have a museum of climate adaptation, part of which is arts, culture, literature. This is because, look at something like our agricultural calendar. It is tied to our festival, sessions. Now, when climate change affects when we plant, when we harvest, the Yam Festival will not take place the time it used to take place. And the people that have lost their culture have lost everything about them. Inasmuch as we want to preserve the environment, we have to look at it from a very holistic point of view. In fact, there are videos I received from some of the projects we are doing in the communities where some of these sacred, what do they call them, groups come out and do libations and do all of those things just because rains have not come. Okay? So how can you separate that? From now henceforth, this session will be part and parcel of all our events. That is why, Eugene, just excuse me, tonight we have the cultural evening. We started it last year. It continues today. For every Yofafa, we'll be having the cultural evening. We'll be having this session. So thank you very much. I know I've taken a lot of time, but I thought that I should be in this session so as to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we go back to this table. And please try to be brief now. From here henceforth, let's try to be brief, straight to the point. And don't thank, let me thank them on your behalf. So thank you so much so that you don't spend time thanking them. Just go straight. Your name and your question.
Okay, my name is Fatima Zana and I'm from Nigeria. So I really believe that this session is really crucial in the journey we are on, or let me say the journeys we have been on. So in this climate change communication, we all know that communication, language, and then, how am I supposed to put this? How we communicate to people, and also how we pass on, and in which language we are going to pass it on. And then knowledge. You mentioned the 4 pillars of knowledge. So in whatever we do, we actually have to still go back. Before we communicate, we have to actually have the knowledge. Then we will now communicate it, and also passing it on in the language the people will understand us. So you mentioned the 3 pillars, which you said you came up with, right? So I was actually thinking how you came up with that, because as a professor, it took you a long way. So coming up with those pillars, something must have led on to it. So my question here is, how can we actually bring out the art in our communication?
Merci au professeur pour sa présentation. À partir des différentes rencontres internationales, il a été décidé que chaque État, en plus de la CDN, doit produire une communication nationale. Du coup, l'atelier est très intéressant. Pourquoi? Comment est-ce que, à partir des langues locales, on peut communiquer sur les changements climatiques? Maintenant, les communications nationales, comment on fait comment on fait pour réussir à intégrer le volet langue locale dans la communication nationale au niveau de tous les pays africains? Peut-être chez nous, ça peut être, je sais pas compliqué, mais c'est possible. Il y a les réseaux sociaux, il y a la télé. Avec 200 langues, comment on fait? Plus de 200 langues nationales, comment on fait? Du coup, j'ai pensé à une proposition, peut-être j'anticipe pour demain. Est-ce qu'il ne serait pas intéressant de penser à un plaidoyer national pour chaque pays où on réclame des communications en langue locale? Merci.
Merci beaucoup. I'm going to move towards the back. I'm going to take only a few hands. I'm done with the front, sorry. I'm moving to the next row, and I'm going to start with the gentleman in white. Sorry, I've moved on, unfortunately. Can we have at least 2 people in the room moving the microphone? Where are the Acess staff? Victor, the microphones, just be vigilant and make sure you move the microphone to a table if there's none. All right, you have the floor, please, quickly.
Thank you so much. I would like to know, given that our understanding of climate change impacts between the global north and global south is different due to the geographical differences. So I would like to understand and learn from you. What do we use, or how do we use language to integrate the cultural and the geographical differences to pass across information in climate adaptation finance negotiation? How do we integrate those geographical differences? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Here in the middle, the hand right in front of me. Yes, I'll end with this.
Okay, my question is, she's talked about us using literature, and the professor said we should be using the language that is familiar with the people that we are communicating with. What do you do in a situation where you are communicating in the language they understand, but the first thing they ask from you is how they are going to benefit from what you are doing, and if you are going to pay them? Because in most rural areas, they'll ask how much you're going to pay them for what you are doing and for asking them the questions you're asking them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to take a break here and allow the panel to respond to these questions, and then we'll see how much time we have for another round. Let me start with you, Prof. If you want to address, and invite any of the panelists to feel comfortable addressing any of the questions that have been raised.
All right. Is that okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Right. Okay. How did I get to the pillars of knowledge? Let me first of all say that there are 4, not 3. I emphasize on 3. I left out what I call knowledge management, which is very crucial. That's, you want to see to what extent the knowledge that is available in your country or in your council or wherever you have power over, how that knowledge is going to be used in such a way that you can maximize the use of it to the benefit of all of the people. So you must have management principles. So how do I get to that? Well, I am a linguist by training, and linguistics is science. Someone said that linguistics is the most scientific of the humanities and the most humane of the sciences. All right. So the methodology that's available, and looking at what happens in the North, living there for many years, and seeing what happens with respect to their development, it's possible to map out that you do have these categories. And since I have communicated that in many conferences and discussed them, I'm sure that a lot of people are satisfied with that. There may be some additions here and there, but that is essentially correct. Now, the other component of your question was, how do I bring out, I'm not sure that I got that very clearly. How can we make knowledge accessible?
So how can arts be used to make a communication accessible and relatable?
All right, good. Yeah, and I think that's very crucial. That's a very important point, because she talked about the importance of art as, and let me use words she didn't use, but that's what she meant. Art has a number of finalities or objectives. It's there to please, for you to enjoy. Okay, that's number one, because people just enjoy what is happening. It's there to educate. There may be messages you want to pass across, and they come across. So it is there to build, to inform. And so art is that important. And artists, especially those who go to school to learn about art and art forms, know that language forms are quite crucial, that the stylistics. How do you deliver what you want to say in such a way that people like it? You like to read Chinua Achebe. Why do you like to read him? Is it because of the proverbs that he punctuates his speech with, so that you, okay. So there are all of these details which artists use to ensure that they endear themselves to the population, so that we like them because of what they say. Okay, then the other one had to do with... je crois que vous avez posé une question sur le multilinguisme. C'est de ça qu'il s'agit, n'est-ce pas? Que nous avons beaucoup de langues au Cameroun. En Afrique, en général, oui. OK. Non, ça, c'est, pour nous, linguistes, ce n'est pas un problème. À vrai dire, nous croyons que le multilinguisme et le multiculturalisme, c'est une richesse. Ah oui, c'est une richesse dans la mesure où la diversité est une valeur qu'il faut promouvoir. La monotonie avec une seule langue, une seule culture, ça ne donne rien. Donc, pour nous, il est question, et nous avons proposé comme une politique linguistique pour le Cameroun, nous pouvons adopter et mettre en œuvre l'utilisation de toutes nos langues. D'abord au niveau des communes, il y a 360 communes, mais 250 langues. Donc si chaque commune devait s'occuper d'une des langues seulement, vous verrez que cette difficulté de multiplier des langues n'est plus un problème dans la mesure où nous pouvons, n'est-ce pas, décentraliser l'instrumentalisation de nos langues pour qu'elles puissent être utilisées pour former, informer et développer notre pays.
All right, yes.
Let me just add something to what Prof has just said about the multiplicity of language, indigenous languages. You know, like he has said, Cameroon alone has more than 250 languages. If you take Nigeria, Nigeria has more than 15. 500, voilà, 500, yes, 500. Take any country here, you will see that you have many indigenous languages. And like Prof has said, they are our riches, because when you know a language, it's an asset to you. You can use it to gain many types of knowledge. And you can also transmit what you know to many listeners. So you have many interlocutors, you have many people to buy your ideas, and which is an asset to you. But the one thing I want to add is that, you know, when we go for international seminars in Europe, in the Americas, what happens? You see, there's a translation service that does translation into into all the languages that I use, the European language. It could be English, French, Spanish, German, and so on. Is there any translation into an African language in those international seminars? Don't you see that even at that level, you go and give your ideas to them in their language. They take it and use it against you. They take your knowledge. They construct satellites. They go up to the skies. They burst the clouds, and rain falls and comes and sweeps their houses. You know? So what we are talking here about developing our indigenous languages is that we can also develop it in such a way that it enters the translation system, where in international conferences, an African language is used. Most of us have taken flights to come here. You know that when you take Kenyan Airlines, they speak in Kikiyu, Swahili. Kiswahili. If you take other airlines, but if you take, Ethiopian Airlines, they also speak in their one of their languages, or two. So, but if those languages can be used in the planes, the white man himself, or those in the north, they use those planes. Do they understand those languages? But they use their own language, English and French, they understand. Whereas we don't have a space out of maybe our airlines and things where they can use our language. So one of the things we can do is African countries can work to develop their indigenous languages, at least some of them, and then use them even in the international scene for greater and wider communication.
All right, thank you so much. Did you want to add something, just very briefly?
Yes, sure.
Yes.
I want to comment. One person asked how we can integrate art in our advocacy or in what we do. And my shortest answer to that is collaboration. Yesterday we had one of the speakers talk a lot on collaboration. So I would say, instead of trying to do it yourself, collaborate with artists. And not only any kind of artists, collaborate with artists who understand the context. It's going to help to pass your messages more clearly. That links to another person who asked, what will you do if people keep asking what they would gain from what you're bringing? Sometimes I think it is also our communication, which gets back to language. Were you able to communicate to them the value that you are bringing, or you were just able to communicate your project? If you bring it as a project, I feel like, oh, you're doing this because you want to achieve it. You want to complete your project and take the accolades that you've completed the project. But were you able to communicate to that community what they are benefiting from it? Did you even understand their needs? It's not needs that you sat in your home and assumed. Did you do research to understand what they really need in that community to bring it? Because if you bring something that I really need, I'm not going to say no to it because I already know that is what I'm benefiting. But if you sit and assume that I need something, then you bring it to me and I tell you that, oh, I don't need this thing, you can take it back. It's not my fault, it is your fault.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much. Now, I have a very serious problem. If you notice, the arrangement up here has started to change. And you see there's some 2 new speakers that have been added to the setup we had. That's from the band that's preparing for our cultural evening. They have had to suspend their setting up because this session was taking long. If we must have a very wonderful time this evening, we have to provide them enough time to set up, which means that we need to wrap this up in the next 2 minutes. To be able to do that, I'm going to take only one question. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to use my powers as moderator to, if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. And I'm going to, let me see everyone who wants to ask a question. I'm looking around. There are only 3 people who want to ask a question, so I'm going to allow those 3 people to speak. Only 3 of them. I'll give each of you 30 seconds, starting with you.
Thank you very much. Mine is more like an appreciation. I want to thank everyone for this session. And of course, the writer and the spoken word writer, I appreciate your words. So when I am making a comment, I tend to be very emotional. And I channel that energy into writing. I learned this very much from Ngungi wa Thiong'o's writing on Matengari's story, where he depicted the political situation of the country, and he painted a name. The government read this story and sent an envoy into a community thinking it was a living human. You know, so in situations where we cannot point out, for example, when we say we want climate justice, we want the polluters to pay, and the polluters are right there. How do we convey it if we are afraid of them arresting us? So I learned from Ngungi, where that even the politicians are following, those who are supposed to do what they are supposed to do are following, whether in writing or art. So I painted a story, and the government went after that story. Same with Chnage of Nigeria. He had written about the Biafran War before the Biafran War occurred. And when the Biafran War happened, the Nigerian government went after him. And it was just a story he painted. They said, oh, you were brewing this all along. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's 30 seconds. That lasted 1 minute. We wouldn't want that to repeat. So there was a hand here. Yes.
All right.
30 seconds, please. It should last 30 seconds.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. First, they say fundamentally we are storytelling beings. And in that regard, I'm asking the question directly to Prof. Chumo. Can you conveniently say that communication and the art of persuasion or negotiation are the tools for communications whose relevance cannot go extinct in the face of artificial intelligence as we advance?
All right. It sounded like you came you came ready to put Prof on the spot. Our last hand over there. Yes.
Pour pouvoir s'adapter au changement climatique. Ma question, c'est de savoir comment intégrer le genre, ça veut dire les personnes handicapées en termes de communication dans nos projets et programmes. Parce que quand je remarque à cet atelier, je ne vois pas de personnes handicapées. Je sais qu'il faut utiliser des moyens, des outils vraiment qui est vraiment dépensant pour pouvoir prendre en compte ces personnes. Mais je veux en même temps faire un plaidoyer auprès de cette structure d'intégrer les personnes handicapées
Merci.
lors de ces ateliers-là.
Merci beaucoup. What I did not say is that Sandy is also a sign language interpreter. So we're going to start the answers to this round of questions with her, and then we'll move towards Professor Tonifo, and that will be the wrap for this afternoon. So the question is, even as we discuss communication, we need to also take into account the gender dimension, and my definition of gender includes people with handicap. How do we communicate to these groups of people? And that's why I was starting with you, because I know you are also a sign language interpreter.
Okay. All right, so that question gets back to Axia. It sounds like you're sending them a bullet. Because last year we had sign language interpretation at Yofafa. So the easiest way to integrate them is to make use of sign language in conversations like this, and make use of Braille when you're sending out information. I know Braille can be a little bit difficult, but if we are able to record the same things that we are saying in voice, visually impaired people are going to go along with us. I guess those are the two groups of people living with disabilities that are going to find difficulties engaging in conversations like this. So it again boils down to us collaborating with people who can do this. And I really appreciate Yofafa. Last year, I was able to come in here. This year, life things were a little bit difficult, but we were able to do sign language interpretation, which plays a huge role in the integration of the deaf community. And there was one more question. Can I remember it? Okay.
Yeah, when you think about it, let's.
No, that was to Prof.
Yes, there was the very first question to Prof.
What was the question?
It was a question about the skill and the art of communication and negotiation, and how that survives in the age of artificial intelligence.
Right. Yes. Yeah, good question. You see, knowledge is dynamic, meaning that it's not static. What we know today may change tomorrow because of a number of dimensions, a number of variables. And so artificial intelligence has been around with us. Many of you are only discovering it now because there's a lot of talk about it. But in 1991, I attended a conference on artificial intelligence. It had to do with cognitive variables that were leading to it. But of course, there's been so much work on it that it is now manifest and can bring in additional value to all kinds of things that we know with respect to information and communication technology. So that's why it is becoming very important. So you ask the question, how do we integrate that in all of what we're doing? And I say that is a question mark for thinking, conceptualization, research, and say, I should have begun by saying that language is very, very powerful, because you can use language to communicate, to inform, you can use it to build, to construct, but you can also use it to destroy, to vilify. Okay, so you are saying that artificial intelligence is coming in, yes, but we must watch out and see what we can do to ensure that it does not create a lot of difficulties that will lead to the regression of the development of humanity up the ladder of development. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. To add to what the previous speakers have said, we need to include the evaluation, monitoring and evaluation of communication in whatever we do. Whatever research we do, we must find, at one point we must evaluate whether our communication was effective. Did our message get across to many people? Did they understand us or they just listen to us? That evaluation is very important in your research, in your projects, in everything. And it, to add to what Sandy, yes, what Sandy said about, no, not the handicap. Actually, the people you meet to talk to, or to present a project or to, about climate finance. If at the end of your project, for instance, you want to have trust, if you want them to have trust in you, you must build collaboration. You must strengthen collaboration with them. Because if you don't come back for that evaluation, they will not trust you. They will not collaborate with you, in the future, in your future projects. So one of the things you must do, go back to the population and, do restitution. And after that, you can gain their trust. You can gain their collaboration.
Can I have 30 seconds? Then
Yes, please. Just 30 seconds.
Okay. Somebody asked about what do you do when you do not have freedom of speech, even in art? There is something in writing called using pseudonyms. That means you're using names that are not your own. If you are getting to that red zone and you really think that you don't want to put your head on the line in this case, but you want your word to be out, you can use a name that is not yours to send out that message. Point two, the thing that we have is that we have the ability to say things without necessarily saying them. If you've read the book Animal Farm, that book was about the revolution. That book was one of the biggest political books ever written, but it was written about animals. So if you read it, you think that it is children's play, but it is until you interpret it that you understand what it was for. That is one of the techniques that artists can use in order to escape oppression and lack of freedom of speech.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we have come to the end of this session, and if I were to summarize, I would say that communication and language can help us to be more accessible. That's one of the things that came up quite frequently, but also more relatable, especially when we deal with the different contexts and are able to navigate the different nuances that could exist. For us, the aim of this process is so that we can be able to develop and promote a narrative of these issues that are relevant to us. One of the reasons we think this is necessary is because young people in Africa are being exposed to different understandings and meanings of these issues that are not necessarily relatable to our context, and sometimes even detrimental to our own interests. And I want to thank the panel for doing such a wonderful job in conveying the foundational skills and knowledge that is necessary for us to be able to do that work. And I want to invite you now in a very big way to applaud our team of experts, as I also invite them to take their seats. And I'm going to stay here just to make a few announcements. We have the opportunity to take a quick 1 hour, 30 minutes break. For those who are in the hotels, it's just enough time for you to go and change up, and we are going to come back to this room for our networking dinner, which is now taking a very cultural dimension. And so please try to be back here on time. We want to finish early so that those of us who are based in Yaoundé and have to go back home, some driving across the city, will not be doing that drive very late in the night. If there are any other logistical and technical questions, we are still going to use the WhatsApp group to communicate. Except you have an urgent issue Please do not overwhelm the technical team with issues that you could handle by just being a little more patient. So thank you so much for your patience, and see you very soon in about an hour or two.